Good day, everyone. Welcome to English for academic and professional purposes. For our first lesson, I will be giving you an introduction to English for academic and professional purposes. For today's lesson, we would be differentiating academic and non-academic texts. We'll also be talking about the different types of academic and non-academic texts, as well as the different factors that shape academic writing. Let's begin by defining what academic texts are. Academic texts are simply characterized as type of texts that are written by professionals in a particular field. So take, for example, medical field, education field, and so on and so forth. This type of text is also well edited and it often takes years to publish. It's not easy to come up with a particular academic text and even to get someone or have a publisher publish it. It is also a kind of text that uses formal language. Similarly, since it is written by professionals in a particular field, more often than not, academic text contains words and terms that are very specific to that particular field. So take, for example, if it's a doctor writing about certain things in the field of medicine, then therefore he or she might be using words and terms that are specific to medicine alone. And people like us, take for example, who are not familiar with the field of medicine, we can consider these terms as unfamiliar to us. Okay? Now, these terms that are very specific, these words and terms that are specific to a particular field are what we refer to as jargons. Academic texts also contain lists of sources and references. All right, so what do we mean by that? Every information that is presented in a particular academic text, it has to be backed up by, or it has to be supported by other references. Okay, it has to be validated by other sources. It has to be validated by other references. And more often than not, when you form academic texts, you refer to other sources as well. The main goal of academic text is basically to advance human understanding in a particular discipline. So there's a particular topic that more often than not is very unfamiliar to your readers. And as someone who is professional in that particular field, or you have a broad knowledge of that particular topic, then you just want your readers to basically understand what is that particular topic all about, or what that concept is all about. Next, since academic text uses formal language, it could be challenging for beginning readers or for novice readers. First and foremost, it uses jargon, so these terms might be unfamiliar to them. And formal language often entails us to use words that are not commonly used during conversation or when reading non-academic texts. In nature, academic texts are considered to be something that are informative, meaning it provides information, it gives us new knowledge. Okay, next, it is also characterized as something that is argumentative in nature. And when we say argument, there are points of view that are being discussed, or certain points that are to be discussed. And then, of course, it has to be objective as well. Not subjective, but rather objective, meaning there has to be no bias. The information that you are presenting does not need to be biased or leaning towards a particular belief or a particular point of view. It has to always present all sides of the story. Some examples of academic texts include school books and textbooks, the ones that you typically use in school or in the university. Journal articles are also considered to be academic texts, and other research proposals and papers. Some other newspapers and magazine articles are considered to be academic texts, particularly if these are broadsheets. Okay, broadsheet newspapers might contain pieces or articles that are academic in nature, and some magazines as well, like National Geographic, science magazines, and so on and so forth. Okay. Thesis and dissertations are also considered to be pieces of academic text. There are also different types of academic text. The first one is the descriptive academic text. When we say descriptive, basically it just provides description. So how do we do it in terms of writing an academic text? When we say descriptive academic text, these are the type of academic texts that provide facts and information. So it delivers facts and information to support the concept, to support the idea, in a way describing that particular concept, describing that particular idea as well. Some keywords, particularly in forming objectives in writing descriptive text, include identify, report, record, summarize, and define. So when you see this as an objective, or when you think of these things, okay, as your objective, your purpose of writing that particular academic text, then definitely the type of academic text that you have to write is a descriptive text. Next one, analytical. When we say analytical, in an analytical academic text, information and facts are organized. Now, how do we organize these pieces of information? You group them into categories, themes, different parts, okay? You organize them into different types, and you try to identify the relationships among them. Now, when you try to identify them, or when you have identified the relationships, their connection among each other, then that's the time that you can organize them into different categories, groups, themes, parts, and types. Again, some keywords that you can use: analyze, compare, contrast, relate, and examine. The third type of academic text is persuasive. So when we say persuasive academic text, it simply includes arguments, recommendations, interpretations, or even an evaluation of the work of another. Now, why do we do that? Because we want our readers to believe in whatever we are saying. That's why it's called persuasive. You are trying to present certain things that would affect or influence the way that your readers think, okay? Or the way that your readers will consider this particular concept or particular idea. Now, when you write this, unlike the other types of academic text, in persuasive academic text, you also add your own point of view. Okay, aside from the point of view of others, you also try to add your own point of view, but still in an academic manner, in a scientific and objective manner. Now, how do we do this? Even if you try to add your own point of view, your own interpretation needs to be supported by pieces of evidence. It doesn't have to be, or it couldn't be just is or as is, okay? Just because you believe in it, that's how it's supposed to be. Your belief, your opinion has to be also supported by evidence. Now, you have to ask yourself, why did I even think about it like this in the first place, okay? Why did I even consider it like this in the first place? Why do I believe that this is the case? So you have to always support your own beliefs, your own opinions in a persuasive academic text. Some of the keywords include argue, evaluate, discuss, and take a position. Lastly, we have critical academic texts. Critical academic texts simply require you to consider at least 2 points of view. Okay, as a reader and as a writer, okay, you have to consider at least 2 points of view, meaning, okay, a point of view of another, and of course, your own point of view. Now, in other words, it could be argumentative in nature. All right. So, example keywords that might be included when you are writing in a critical academic text include critic, debate, disagree, and of course, evaluate. Since we're done with academic texts, let's now move forward to describing non-academic texts. Non-academic texts are more often than not written for the mass public. Therefore, it's written for the general population. Even if you didn't go to school, even if you are not a professional or working professional, okay, you can understand non-academic texts. Unlike academic texts, non-academic texts are actually published quickly and they can be written by anyone. The reason for this is because it often does not involve research or even a mentioning of your sources. So you don't have to refer to anything else. You don't always have to refer to anything else when you are writing non-academic text, okay? And it's not a tedious process. The writing process is not as tedious as writing academic text because it doesn't involve a lot of research, a lot of doing background work, okay? Doing a lot of prep work for it. If academic texts use formal language, non-academic texts use informal and more conversational language. So it's a language that many people could understand. Even the normal, typical person can understand that particular piece of work. It also may contain slang. So academic texts contain jargons, okay, words that or terms that are specific to that particular field. On the other hand, non-academic texts contain slang. So these are words and phrases that are commonly used by people during conversation, or these are words that are formed on the streets. In some non-academic texts, the author may also be unknown. So it doesn't necessarily require a name of an author, or it doesn't necessarily have to contain a name of an author. Non-academic texts deliver simple and basic information. Like what I have mentioned earlier, something that could easily be understood by anyone or by anyone who would want to read that particular text. It can also be read and easily understood by any kind of reader, just like what I have mentioned earlier. Therefore, non-academic texts, unlike academic texts, are more personal in nature. Okay, because they tend to be emotional. It presents a lot of emotions, it presents a lot of feelings, okay, and it could be very impressionistic. So meaning it wants to leave an impression to its readers, or there is a certain type of feeling it evokes. There's a certain type of emotion that it's trying to evoke. Okay, and unlike academic texts, non-academic texts are very subjective. So it could just present your own viewpoint without the need to prove why you even think of it that way. You can present your opinion without even justifying that particular opinion in the first place. Okay, so it has bias. It may present bias. Some examples of non-academic texts include blog posts, that which is very common recently. All right, fiction books are also considered to be non-academic texts. Similarly, some letters, personal letters, could be considered non-academic texts, as well as personal journals and diaries. Here is a summary of the structure, the purpose, and the tone, differentiating academic texts and non-academic texts. Now let's move forward to the different factors that shape academic writing. What do we mean by factors that shape academic writing? Simply put, these are some of the things that you really have to consider whenever you are writing a piece of academic text. These are some of the things that you have to think about, carefully plan about, carefully consider when you are producing academic texts. These factors include, number one, audience, the purpose, the organization, the style, the flow, and of course, your presentation. Let's go first to audience. Audience is basically whom are you writing for? Okay, it could be answered by the question, whom are you writing for? Who are going to be reading this particular text, okay? Particularly this piece of academic text. Is it going to be doctors? Is it going to be other professionals? And so on and so forth. Why is it important to consider the audience? It's important because it will actually influence the way that you write. If you know that these people would easily understand, Okay, these people, for example, are highly knowledgeable about the topic that you are writing about. Then you don't need to provide too much information. Okay, you don't need to provide a lot of information or background information rather, because you already know in your mind that they know a lot of things about that particular concept or particular idea. Now, for example, if you are writing about a particular topic that you know they are professionals but they don't know a lot of things about that particular topic or concept because it's new, then that's the time that you have to provide a lot of background information. So your audience is also very important because it also is a decisive factor. Okay, it's a factor that will help you decide on how to go about your piece of work. Next, let's go to purpose. Again, purpose is also very important because purpose is basically your objective. Why are you even writing this piece of academic text in the first place? What's the reason behind it? Is it to provide information? Is it to differentiate things? Is it to give clarification and so on and so forth? So it's very important that you know your purpose because it will give direction to how you write. Okay, when you know your objective, when you know your end goal, it's very easy for you to plan out how to get to that particular end goal. Unlike when you don't know what's going to happen at the end, what's expected to happen at the end, then you don't know how to get there rather. Okay, so it's very important that you also know or identify the purpose of writing this particular piece of academic text in the first place. Next, let's go to organization. Organization simply refers to how you will be arranging your ideas. If you could still remember the concepts that were discussed in your reading and writing class, particularly lessons on text structure and text patterns, then organization would be easy for you. Okay? You just need to determine, guided by your purpose, guided by your objective, guided by your end goal, you just need to determine how are you going to be organizing it. If your end goal is to provide, for example, a descriptive or a description of that particular concept, then what type of text structure, what type of text pattern are you going to be using? Of course, it's also descriptive. So you need to provide descriptions, okay, by providing facts and, of course, pieces of information. So it's very important to remember that your purpose and your organization always go hand in hand. Next, of course, you also need to consider the style that you are going to be using, okay? Now, how are we going to do this? You just need to answer this question. What technique or techniques will you be using whenever you write this or when you are writing this particular text? Okay? Now, how do we do that? Remember that academic texts entail a particular level of formality. So, what level of formality will you be using? Would it be enough for your audience? Okay? Would it be appropriate for your audience when they see it, when they get to read it? So you have to consider that one as well. Similarly, your style, like what I have mentioned earlier, is guided by who is going to be your audience. Okay, similarly, take for example, you also need to consider the text pattern and the text structure. Is it enough to stick to just one text pattern? Is it enough to stick to just one text structure? Or you can do a combination of one or a combination of two or more. Okay, but still, of course, it would really depend on who will be reading your text. Another factor to consider is, of course, the flow. You just need to ask yourself the question, how well will you be expressing these ideas? Similarly, just like in organization, once you have figured out the way that to organize your thoughts, your information, your facts, okay, the way that you have already plotted out those things or outline those things, then definitely flow will come after. Always remember that when writing academic text, your main goal is always to inform. So aside from your other goals, your main goal should be to provide information to your readers. Now, in order for you to do that, of course, you need to make sure that your ideas, so the concepts, the information that you will be presenting will flow smoothly. Meaning there is a good transition from one idea or one concept going to another until you reach the end. Last but not the least, of course, is your presentation. Is your output, is your academic text ready for publishing? Is it ready to be consumed by your readers, your intended readers? Is it ready to be read by other people? Okay, so after accomplishing your text, of course, first and foremost, you have to write a draft of it, okay? And then it will go through sets of revision. It's not just one revision. Sometimes it will go through a lot. That's why you have to remember that academic texts are not very easy to complete or to accomplish. It will really take time, okay? Because it might go through different levels of revision and different kinds of revision. Once the revisions are already done as well, okay, once the layout is finalized, then you may consider your output to be ready for publishing or ready to be consumed, to be read by your intended audience. Here are my sources and references. Thank you for joining me today.